So there's a wake sleep button. You can have this desk on automatic mode where it'll like turn itself off after like set periods of time. I think it's like 15 seconds up to 10 minutes. I don't know why they're 15 seconds, but if it doesn't feel a fade a move or a knob move, it will turn itself off. There's a wake sleep button, and you hold it down like you're putting it to sleep, and it struggles, and it turns off.
Yeah.
And then it keeps power to the desk, and you'll notice the little light will just flicker. So if none of your switches are making the LEDs, you know the desk has gone to sleep. You should try and do it really if you're leaving the room for an extended period of time.
Also because of the heat and the AC.
Yeah, if you want the room to cool down, even if you're in a session, you're on lunch, you can turn the desk like this and it won't affect anything. It will just put you to sleep. One like rule I like to have if you're turning the desk on or sleep mode is cutting the audio on the master. Obviously, we'll go through all the bits later, but like this cut button cuts all the audio from the desk, which means if the desk is turning on or if these racks are turning on, it means you won't get pops in the speakers. And again, this desk can kind of like, it's not going to put out too much signal, but it's going to, it could damage if you do it a billion times. Per channel strip, you have the exact same features. So you have your input gain knob. So this is the preamp stage. So this is the preamp that is literally just an XLR on the back of the desk that gets tied to the patch bay. So just as on an interface of any kind, this is just the same thing. So you have your gain. A resounding feature of this desk is that all of the values on every sort of knob are quite arbitrary. So this is the only one that has any sort of specific, but it just says -12 to 70. You're never going to be like, oh, I want to give it 35 dB of gain. Just listen. Just use your ears. So yeah, turn the mic up. You have phantom power. This desk has a safety feature, so it will flash a little bit before it actually sends it. So if it starts, what that does is, as far as I know, pings a little bit of power down the strip. If it senses like it might get blown back, like power sent back, or the device can't handle it, it might not allow you to actually turn it on. But it's also just, it will stop it popping as well. Like you'll see, it does a tiny little pop, but usually it mutes itself when it does that. It's quite fancy. That being said, you can send power to ribbon mics from this desk, and you don't want to do that. So just, you are able to do it, and you shouldn't do it, but it won't stop you doing that because a lot of those mics don't have that sort of circuit built in. So please don't blow up our ribbon mics. Or other clients' ribbon mics, that'd be even worse. You have a phase flip. Phase flip on the way in. So that only affects the preamp and the microphone, as it were, not what's coming back from the software. So it's not like if you had already recorded a bunch of stuff and you're across the desk, this phase flip won't do anything. It's only for the preamp stage. This little box here is probably the only part of the desk that only does preamp. So phase flip's useful under snare. You know, if you've got a snare bottom, you have to phase flip it. Any mics facing the opposite way from each other, phase flip them.
Is there any benefit to doing it at that stage?
It kind of stops you forgetting about it.
Okay.
So for example, I always forget to phase flip my snare bottoms, and then I'll be like, why does my snare bottom sound terrible? And it's because I never actually phase flipped it. So it can just guarantee that what you're printing is like
right.
The way I like to think about analog desks like this is it's the bet you can print your audio into the software as good as possible, and like as nice and as well balanced and as mixed as possible, essentially. And you can just treat Pro Tools as just like a recording medium for the tracking stage. So think anything you can do with phase or, for example, as well, there's a drive button. So the drive reduces the headroom and lowers the what do you call it? The clipping stage, the saturation stage of the preamp down a little bit. So it means if you're slamming the preamp pretty loud with a kick drum, you'll get nice analog saturation, and it allows you to do that quicker. So you don't have to absolutely crush it. You can put this in, and it just gives you a little bit of a shorter kind of gain stage, which sounds really nice. I like using it on kick drums. So again, like your kick drum could sound a lot beefier from the preamp stage, as opposed to going into Pro Tools and putting like a saturator plugin on it. You can do the real thing here. There is a line button. We've been in this studio for like a year and a half, nearly 2 years now. I don't think I've ever used the line button. I might have used it one time, but pretty much it's quite an uncommon feature unless you're plugging like a keyboard directly into the preamp without a DI box. And I wouldn't recommend doing that. I would just use a DI box. So you have the option like line level signal. So it's things like outputs from audio recorders from certain keyboards, from certain bits of like samplers or synthesizers might have a line out, and it allows you just to switch the preamp over, and have the signal sort of the appropriate type of signal coming in, as opposed to trying to slam it through a mic signal, which will just cause you problems. There's going to be quite a few buttons here, which I'm basically going to tell you should never really have to press, if I'm honest, because it's just sort of heritage features of analog desks that don't really get used that much anymore. Path flip on this. This path flip here, when it's out, which all of them are, it'll say SF short fader on the preamp bit here, and it'll say LF here where it says mon. Mon is monitor. What that means is the short fader is what's affected by, or is where the preamp signal goes to. So it will end up in the short fader, and your monitor, which is what returns from Pro Tools, will come up the long fader. You can switch that. Primarily what that will do is mean if you've got a signal coming in here and you switch that over and you try and record off of this channel in Pro Tools, like if you just select input, whatever this is, 23 on Pro Tools, it will no longer work because Pro Tools comes directly from the short fader. So essentially what I'm saying is don't press that button. There's no need. Like there's maybe a really niche case where you might need to do it, where you might need a few more channels or something, but like if you're recording more than 32 channels in here, I'll be quite shocked because we've done it once and it was really stressful. So you probably won't be able to need to do that. The knob next to it, trim, again, is one of those ones, it has a notch in the middle because that's just pass through. It's just 0. It does nothing. There is a couple cases in which you might want to use the trim. What the trim does is like a global volume up and down for kind of the entire channel strip. But primarily, you can see it says mon next to it. That's because it's assigned to the monitor fader. So if you are, for example, playing a backing track from Pro Tools to someone to sing to, you say we've got a vocal session, and that backing track's like mixed quite loud because on its way to sort of final mix, you just want to add a vocal. It might be sending out Pro Tools really, really loud, and you might start hitting the top of the meters, and you might be clipping, you might be distorting. You can then just trim down those levels. It doesn't affect the recording, it doesn't affect the Pro Tools level, it doesn't affect anything. It just affects your monitor stage, like how you listen to it back. Obviously, you've got the fader control here. You know, you can do that. You can adjust your volumes with the faders. But there may be a case where like
It's kind of when you're not in the ideal working space.
yeah, exactly. And this is where you get into like gain staging stuff. No matter if it's coming out of Pro Tools too loud, even if you're here, it will be distorting. This is just a fader of like this. This doesn't control like the gain of the signal coming back from the monitor stage. This does. Luckily, everything in our system is all sort of normalized to quite a standard level. But
Hopefully that should never happen.
yeah, but you might even see channels 1 and 2 not often channels 1 and 2 where people are playing back from Pro Tools are sometimes notched back like a couple dB. Again, it's like an arbitrary control, so you kind of have to just wing it. You have to sort of be like, okay, they both look about at 10 o'clock there or whatever. Kind of useful tool. There's an argument to say that if you're having to use this, something in your project's not being mixed correctly.
Yeah.
So you could just do it in the box. But if you're in a pinch and you're like, oh, that's just too loud, done. You can just turn it down. Sometimes you do stuff like that to avoid solving a bigger problem in the actual project, which is, just a standard issue at this point. Similarly, you see here underneath that, it says direct output. So it says direct output and pre. So
Just taking a picture of
the
strip.
I'm getting bits.
the direct output, there is a great, the manual for this desk is really detailed and it's got like nice diagrams for all this stuff as well. Recommend it. I think we've actually got a physical copy of it somewhere. On direct out, this is similar to that path flip I was talking about. So where it says channel up there and it goes to SF, like the preamp goes to short fader. Then you see underneath it says direct out short fader. So the direct out is like what goes to the interface to go to Pro Tools. So if you see it all matches up, so like the preamp is going to short fader, and then the direct out to Pro Tools is coming from the short fader because it's also on SF. So that means that you're sending your preamp to the short fader, and then whatever's coming out of the short fader goes to Pro Tools. There is a pre-fader button on that as well, which bypasses whatever you're doing on the short fader. Very niche, more for outboard gear. Probably won't ever use it, if I'm honest. I will explain a good reason to use it once this comes, but for now, again, these two buttons, the path flips on this desk are pretty much unusable. Like, you shouldn't be bothering with them. And if you ever see them in, take them out, because it will cause you problems that you'll be like, why is that not working?
Yeah, I had one of the ones that was really annoying.
I've seen them sometimes around me, and sometimes people would be like, oh, well, why is this not working? Maybe if I do this, just if a switch is out on this desk, it's probably doing the least amount of like damage to your signal chain. It's doing the least amount of changes. So if the EQs are out, if the auxes are out, if all these buttons are out, it's pretty much just blank. So that's always a good place to start, and that's where the desk should be reset to every time you come to it, in an ideal world. But resetting the desk is quite a boring job, so fair play.
In what context would you use the path flip?
So if you wanted to, right, so when we get the compressors in here, or any outboard compressor, if you want to use the path flip, honestly, the only reason I have ever used it is instead of having this short fader to control how much is going to Pro Tools, you have the long fader. Or some old school engineers sometimes actually prefer their monitor, like their listening back, to be on shorter faders, and what they're sending on like the microphones into Pro Tools to be on the longer faders. This is like a traditional setup of like short fader, long fader. Some people in their life have just come across a workflow where they like to use that. So if you did switch that to short fader, like switch this one over, so that the preamp is going to long fader, and you switch the direct out, so that was coming from the long fader, you would then be able to send this would be like your send to Pro Tools, and that would work, and this would be your return to Pro Tools. To me, that's weird, so I don't particularly understand why. And also, if you did do send to Pro Tools from the long fader, you lose all of these little switches on the short fader, which are really functional stuff for recording purposes.
Right.
So you can do like monitoring your microphone send, you can add inserts, you can do pass-throughs. There is a short fader from long fader button. Again, it's a weird button. There's a lot of weird buttons that you can just ignore, basically. But that could be a context in which you use it.
So just to talk about that, then if you were using the long faders to go to the door, then would you have to also switch the path flip on the direct out?
Yes, yeah, you have to
So
do
you'd have to
both.
switch both of them.
Yeah, if you did one of them,
You'd end up not getting anything.
you'd end up not getting anything sent direct out.
I know,
So-
so I'm just trying to.
So what you could do, this is a really weird one, you could switch that one, the first one, to long fader from the preamp, which means your preamp would go to your long fader, and then you put in short fader from long fader, which gives you a
You can
double.
still go from there.
But look how many gain stages we've now got. We've got a
Yeah.
gain stage, and we've got two
Yeah,
sort of
point.
other.
Yeah.
You're just making
Something
it
really
complicated.
specific.
And what you've done there as well is you've lost a monitor fader.
Yeah.
Because all you've done there is done the same thing but with an extra step. I don't know why you do that.
Oh, cool.
So again, there may be some. Usually they retain these features on analog desks for outboard gear and for tape machines. Two things we don't have. So until we get compressors,
Soon.
even still, they're not really got how you would do that. So yeah, basically, long and short is those buttons are pretty much useless. The ones you want to focus on are your preamp stage buttons. Then you have your send section is the easiest way to call it. So your sends from the channel strip. You'll notice you have stereo Q A and B with a pan control, and each one has a post and SF button. So we'll look at those first because they're kind of more functional in the studio. So STQ is a stereo Q. A Q is just really kind of like an aux or a bus. It's all the same. It's all synonym for each other. They're all just the same thing. It's sending audio somewhere else. My engineer that I learned from at uni always just said, if you get confused with audio, it's literally just ins and outs and things going places. So if you just simplify it down to that, it's me just sending something somewhere. So the stereo Qs in this desk, their sort of signal flow is from here. You can monitor them here if you wanted to listen to them. And then if you look at this little matrix here, this little switch matrix here, you have stereo Q A and B are always clicked in to foldback A and foldback B. Foldback A and B go to the headphone amps. And that's kind of a part of what we refer to as normalization. So you don't actually have to plug a lot of stuff in to get things places. So if you essentially turn up something on stereo QA, it will go to the stereo QA, which will go to the headphone amp. So you can, if you just want to get something to the headphones, you can just turn up either A or B. And from the get-go on this desk with no patching, you have 2 headphone mixers.
That's cool.
Which is like really nice because you can just be really forceful and say, no, you only get 2 mixers. But yeah, like musicians, when they're happy and comfortable and can hear themselves properly, whatever you got to do to facilitate that, they're going to make the best tunes when they do that. So, you know, you're just here to capture that and whatever you can do to make them more comfortable. The 2 headphone things is just like how this desk works because it's just how it's been set up. But yeah, each of these stereo cues have a pan control. So because it's a stereo output, all of the stereo cue A and B are always stereo headphones as well. So there's a lot of obvious reasons for that. Some people like stuff panned. We had a string player once who couldn't hear out of their right ear, so we panned all of their mix just to the left, so they had everything they needed in their left ear. Because obviously, if you started going like, well, here's the left and right of the sections, they'd be like, well, I'm missing half the sections because I can't hear them. So sometimes you have to work things like that out. So pan is also like very functional for that on this desk as well. Volume, it's arbitrary. It's from -infinity to nothing. It's just a volume knob. It don't get deep in that. You have post and SF. So post is post fader. So if I'm monitoring vocal here and I've got the post button in, if I turn them down, they will lose it in their headphones. It is post this fader or post a fader. So that's good. I've used that if there's a click in a track and they want the click to come out for a musician's. What is it called when you slow down at the end?
Rallentando.
That's it. One of them ones. When they slow down at the end,
Rit.
they want
Rit.
Rit. That's it.
Yeah.
When they come off of a click, they want to come off a click at the end. You can do that quite nicely and gently. You can like fade their click out for them, and they feel a bit better than going like, oh, cut. You know, it's just gone. They'll be a bit like, oh. So if you fade it out, they can sort of naturally leave the click. So that's what post fade is good for. But really, I'd say most of what you're going to be doing is without that button in. This just goes to the 6 channels on this headphone amp. So if I had something playing back now and I turned that up, you'd see the meters here, and I can literally plug that headphone in there and hear it. That's where it gets to, and then after that is where you patch it.
And before you said the drummer might only have a click.
Yeah.
How come? Is it because?
Oh, that's just me being a bit of an arse.
Oh.
In certain like live recordings, this has actually happened in live recordings, where they're playing together and filming it. You might not want. Some people don't mind, but some people like don't want every member to have cans.
Right.
And if you're playing in a room together and you're a band that's played a lot together, you don't need to hear like loads of guitar and bass or whatever in your ears. So the drummer might just get a click,
Right.
and the vocalist might have in-ears for just their vocal.
Okay.
So that's where you just have like the drummer has a click to keep everyone in time, but not everyone's got a click. They're just playing to the drummer. That's how my band plays. The drummer has a click. We don't have a click because we just like to play off of them because it's easier.
And how do you monitor the cues? Are you listening on
Here, this is the best part of the desk, in my opinion.
and then you're hearing just that back?
You're hearing exactly what would go to the headphones minus the talkback, because
Okay.
otherwise feedback loops.
Yeah, it's like a solo button.
Buttons out
Yeah.
is long fader, free fader.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Makes sense.
with no
Makes
buttons in on the
Yeah.
headphones end, you're going to monitor, the headphones are going to get what's coming back on the monitor, so what's coming back from Pro Tools, and it's not going to be affected by the fader. That's the default setting for the stereo, for the stereo keys.
Yeah.
Which, in my opinion, you should try and stick to one side or the other when you're doing headphones, because there is a 0.25 millisecond delay between the analog desk and what's coming back from Pro Tools. It's not enough for people to notice it when they're playing, so they can monitor back from Pro Tools. It's not that big of a delay. But if you do this and you're having someone listen to something here and something here, so direct from mic and then from Pro Tools, you might get a tiny phase. You might get like a phasing or a flanging effect, which can be really distracting. So I would say stick to one or the other. I tend to stick to just long fader. I don't see much use in someone listening to what the microphone is being sent to Pro Tools as. It's a bit of a weird one. You know, you might do though. And yeah, you can monitor from here with the short fader button. So you've got the option of pre or post fader, long or short fader. You also have that for all of the auxes as well, but it is a little bit of a different case when you're doing those. But that's basically how you can build 2 stereo mixes for headphones from the get-go. If you want to listen to what the headphones are doing, monitor the stereo cue. It is the easiest way. If someone's going, I can't hear this in my headphones, not, well, I'm sending it. You listen to this and you go, actually, they can't hear the click. Why can't they hear the click? Oh, I'm on the short fader. The click's coming from the long fader. Click. You can hear what they're hearing. You're on the same page.
Right.
You could obviously like plug into the headphone amp and listen to their channel as well. I find this is just the easiest way to build it. And you can also hear if things are sounding different in their headphones because, you know, at the end of the day, we're in here listening to these big speakers. They're on these. So you might make adjustments to certain things that might not match what their headphones are doing, if that makes sense. Like, and also because it's a different signal flow, like what comes out of the desk at the stereo mix might sound different to how it gets blended in the stereo cue. So sometimes you might just make adjustments. Your panning might be a bit too aggressive or not aggressive enough. The volumes might just be a bit funky. So, you know, listen to what they're hearing and you'll be on the same page. You can literally say to the musician, I'm hearing what you're hearing. Is that now enough? I know I've heard that I've changed the level of the snare. Is that now good for you?
For the sole purpose of recording and then like
Yeah,
certain levels.
yeah, that's just so they. No. That's
Okay.
just the headphone thing is just so they can hear themselves
Sure.
in the room. And yeah, like I said before, the more comfortable you can make them, if they're like, this sounds wicked, this sounds really nice in my headphones, and you're on the same page as you're hearing the same things, then you're just going to sort of gel better, and you guys are going to like make better things.
Yeah.
The auxes, they are mono. That's the big difference. And they go nowhere by default. Turn this up. You can listen to it the same. You can monitor each aux channel. There's 4 of them. It goes nowhere. It is not patched to anything by default, which is nice because it means you can put it wherever you want. So if you have a little look over here at the headphone amps, there is a knob that says main and aux. So all of them by default will always be should be on main, which means they are just receiving the main signal that is going into the headphone channels, e.g. the stereo cue. So that's just like default, send on the stereo cue like we talked about before, goes to the headphone amp, Bob's your uncle, you can hear it. These headphone amps can do what people like to call more me mixing, which is which is let's say you had drums, bass, guitars, and keys, right? So sometimes a common answer to what do you want more of in your headphones is themselves. They want to hear a bit more of themselves, especially something like a keyboard. They want to have an amp. So like, you know, there's no like live audio in the room with them. They're just hearing it in headphones. So they might want a lot more themselves. You know, guitarists love hearing themselves, so they'll definitely want more of themselves. That's sometimes what you call more me mixing. And that's how we have a functionality for that. So the way you would do that is we're going to jump a little bit into the patch bay to explain this, but I won't direct you over there because we'll talk about it properly later. But on the patch bay, there is a 4 slots per headphone amp. So there's 2 amps, 4 slots each that say aux input. And then what you do is you take a patch cable from the aux and you'd go into from the aux out from the desk and you go into the aux in of the headphone amp. And then on the headphone amp, you have a balance knob here where it says main to aux. So you can blend in that send. So say, you know, this is kind of a weird way to think about it, but so you had like drums, bass, guitar, keys. You could put drums on channel 1, bass on channel aux 2, guitar on aux 3, and keys on aux 4. Plug those into each amp channel, and then you can always give them more of themselves. We'll talk about that on the patch bay because it's more of a patching thing, but that's a way you can build. Yeah, you could theoretically get 6 mixes just from that. The other thing that auxes are good for is when we have our lovely compressors, or any outboard gear as it were, you can patch in to send parallel to your channel. So this would make a copy of your channel, send it to the compressor. So say quite a common thing would be you have your drum bus, your left and right drum bus here. You could put in, turn up aux 1, send that to a pair of compressors and have those come back here, and you've got like a parallel compression situation. So you've got your original drums and your compressed drums, and you can blend them together. You have post and pre, same situation. So you can do that from the short fader, you can do it from the long fader. So on the headphone thing, that's the exact same concept. So usually default to long fader and post fader, pre-fader, sorry. So this doesn't affect anything, and it's from the monitor stage. When you're using like outboard, you might want to do it from the short fader because then it's not being it's not being digitized. Yeah, that's one thing. But also, your compression is going to affect your original like mic signal. It keeps it all analog, keeps it all nice, and then you can just record those at the same time.
What about adding like effects to like people's headphone mixes and stuff?
The way we currently do that, because we're all in the box, is you would bring those effects up on a pair of channels and just send them as if they were just an audio field sort of thing. Yeah, that's how we're doing at the moment. Essentially, say you had I like to keep this side of the desk kind of like actual instruments, and then often this is playback and effects. So say we had a reverb on 17 and 18, like for drums, and a drummer wanted some drum reverb, you would then just say, drum reverb, add it into the mix, add it into the headphones. Simple as that, just like a a mix, essentially. And really, if you had outboard effects as well, you'd probably do the same thing. Or you put them in line on the channels on Pro Tools, and then they're just affecting the, for example, if it was on the vocal, and this is your vocal channel, and that's already going to the headphones, but it's dry, you can just add in line, like as like a plugin, reverb, put the mix down to like 5%, and then it's just acting as if it's like already on the vocal, and they just get
that just save you some channels.
Save you some channels, yeah. If it's something like a vocal, I would do that. I always try and record vocals with a compressor and a reverb on, just because it makes them happier. So that's our like sends. Again, like I said, practically they work a lot better. And we'll just jump back to this matrix thing here. Don't touch it. It will always be like this. I even hate doing that. It will always have the correct cues put in the correct places. Moving on, we have the best part of the desk, the EQ section. I like to leave these in, even if they're not doing anything, because they just sound so lovely. It is a 5-band EQ. 5-band EQ. At the top, you have a high-pass filter. The high-pass filter is it's a 5-band EQ. Most of it is turned on by this one button here that says in, except for the top, except for the high-pass filter. You can use that on its own. High-pass filter goes from 10 Hertz to 400 Hertz. That one does have a top and a bottom, but everything in the middle is, again, arbitrary. Use your ears. This sounds so good. Again, path flip, but this is a very useful path flip. You see it jumps between short fader and long fader. Short fader affects what you're recording. Long fader affects what you're listening to. If you want to try out some EQs for the mix stage later on, leave it on long fader. You're not going to affect your recording at all. It's just on listening back. If you're like, damn, that kick drum sounds great with that EQ, chuck it in there, print it, record it with the short fader in.
I'm assuming it's got SF and LF on.
SF and LF, and when you're going in, when you turn it on, the LED gets brighter. That's another feature of the desk. If it's on, the LED is brighter. So you can see it flashing in there.
Weird design. Is that something coming?
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? The nice thing about the high pass filter on this desk as well is when you do digital high passing or low passing, and you've got quite a hard cut. Digitally, it's actually a lot of times removing all that information from like the digital signal. It's like get rid of that data. This is still like a little circuit board in there. It's all analog. It's all circuitry and capacitors and all that fun stuff. So it's a lot gentler. So like if you do cut at like 200. You really, really needed to bring something back from under there. It's still there. It's just very quiet, but the information is still there, if that makes sense. So that's why these are nice, because you can be a bit more. It's kind of like when you put a high pass filter on a microphone, on a switch. The mic is still moving. It's still sending signal. It's just putting a little cut in there, and it's an analog thing, so it can't remove the information. It can kind of just filter it out. So it kind of sounds a bit like hocus pocus, really, but to me, it does give you that option of just in case. But also, it's a much more gentler roll off. Like, it's not like this big aggressive cut. You still have energy that's there. It's just, I can't actually remember. It'll be in the manual of what the dB slope of it actually is. It'll probably be quite low.
So even if you've printed something, it drops it off, you can still get it back off.
You could. Yeah. You might bring noise floor up, but in low end, you're probably not gonna, because low end noise floor is not really as much of a thing. Mm-hmm. So it's like a safety net, I guess. Yeah. But like I said before as well, instead of it being like, it's probably like that. It's probably like a 12 dB curve, so it's probably very gentle. So that's why you're still retaining quite a lot. Like I'll always chuck these on overheads like there, So that's your high pass. I find these often are left in. So that's a danger game. So do check them if you're recording, because the worst thing is like tracking bass and then someone's left a high pass filter and you're like, why have I got no low end? This bass sounds terrible. Oh, maybe you should try a different bass. Oh, is the amp on right? Oh, there it is. There's all the low
Why
end.
did they design it?
Yeah.
But it's just goes brighter and darker. Like
Yeah, it's not the most clear indicator, so that's why. Well, that's
Yeah.
why resetting the desk is a whole thing, but that's a whole different argument.
Yeah.
You then have your 4-band EQ section split into high frequency, high mid frequency, low mid frequency, and low frequency. There's a hell of a lot of crossover on the frequency sweeps on these. Like, for example, the high frequency starts at 1.5k, the high mid ends at 7k. There's 6k of crossover there, so you've got a ton of control. They also sound lovely. Like, the way it boosts is better than any plugin will. Like, straight up, analog EQs sound way better than any plugin ever could. So functionally, you have a boost. So on the high frequency, you've got a boost. Again, it's just plus and minus. It's not anything specific. From 1.5 to 16, there is one switch on there, which is a bell or a shelf. Automatically, when the button is out, is a shelf. So, a shelf raise at the high frequencies. You can put it into a bell if you really just wanted to point out a certain frequency. If you really had like a nice resonant thing that you wanted to get rid of or boost, you can do that. But I prefer using them on shelf mode because I think they just have really weirdly, putting them all the way up to 16 and shelving at 16 with like a tiny bit up. It's just like that, that air that plugins always boast about.
Is there a visual indicator on the screen, or are you just using your ears?
Just
Right.
Yeah, you could open a analyzer, but yeah, it's
So it's a shelf unless you push in the
shelf unless you push in, yeah. And yeah, the thing that I like using it is with the high frequency in particular is whenever you have a plugin that goes like, oh, do you want to add air, which is that funny like I don't know what that means, like kind of just bright
High end without.
Yeah.
high end without
It's like 14k.
yeah,
plus
it's like you can't hear it but you can feel it kind of vibe. Yeah, I find that doing it on here just like that, like just putting it all the way up to 16, that's really high. And no one can tell me that people can discern like from 16 to 20 with any actual precision. Nope. But it does give you like this brightness, especially on an analog desk. Especially on an analog desk with something like a ribbon mic, you're going to be really rich and warm. So if you want to just bring out a nice, natural, interactive, the way I always think about EQs is they interact with the preamp very nicely. Like the preamp is pushing real electrical signal, which is doing electrical signals in the EQ. So it's all very reactive. So it's more natural than like a digital thing. So you can be really playful with it. And I would probably start with just doing long fader. So just doing it on the monitor just to get used to how they sound. And then if you do move over to the short fader where you're printing them, do it all subtractive. Do only subtractive EQ. Just get rid of things. Because boosting is dangerous. Because as soon as you boost a frequency, the two frequencies kind of on either side of it get affected. It gets muddy. So subtractive is always the way forward because that's more like a surgical thing. Yeah, that's how I sort of operate. But yeah, you move on to the high mids. It's the same. You get a boost and a frequency, but these are always bells. These are always just notch frequencies, and you have a Q filter, so you can make it really, really tight, and the wide on that Q on the EQ is really wide. Like you all know what I mean by Q on EQ, right? So like it's ridiculously wide, so you can use that almost as a shelf, if that makes sense, and sort of a lump. These EQs are EQs that are used by your ears, not by your eyes.
Yeah.
Because they have no boost measurement in dBs. They have no specific frequency notches. The thing that drives me so crazy when people pull out things like, oh, can you boost 3 dB at 432 hertz? You cannot hear that. Like maybe Chris Kimsey, Cameron Craig, those guys who've been in the game for like 4 years, they can maybe hear this. But they have even moved past it, but I don't care. Like this is a very fun tool to just like, and if you really want to get, if I'm honest, if you're at a point where there's like something really like ringy and you're like, wow, that one frequency, that's
just
like,
do it through.
move your mic, change your mic, tune your snare, tune your thing. Like, that's the first thing. And then if you really are stuck and there's just like someone's guitar just has one of those notes that just really sings, do that digitally.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then you can put in like a teeny tiny, like taking out
433
433 to 435 hertz by this much. That's where you go really surgical. So yeah, you have Q, boost, and frequency on the two mid-frequency ones, which are the green and the blue. So you can, and again, like I said, if you look, they have a massive amount of crossover. So the high mid starts at 0.6, it ends at 7. The low mid starts at 0.2, it ends at 2.5. So there's no direct crossover there. but there is with the so the high mid crosses over with the high frequency, and the low mid crosses over with the low. The low is the same story as the high, except you don't have an no, you do. You have boost, level, frequency, and you can put it into bell mode. So the bell on the low is a lot more functional because obviously low frequencies, you have a different amount of information as you would through high frequencies. So 100 versus 90 is a lot more significant than 15k versus 14k. This is a we'll do it. Cool. So maybe room mics. Okay, so this is like a string room mic, I think. It should be at least. Recorded in there. So this is probably the easiest way to demonstrate the EQs quite well. So high frequency, like I said, it's really high at its highest point. No, it's not looping.
Wrong shortcut.
Oh, so yeah, and also very powerful. I find them a bit more, I don't know how to word this, but they're more powerful on cutting than they are on boosting. That's a nice big boost. That's a hell of a cut. That's like quite. It is probably equally tempered, plus or minus, but you can see how much control you've got there. You know, it's brought out some really nice stuff in the top of the strings actually. I can't remember if these are EQ'd on the way in, but you know, at the end of the day, this is what they sound like. The Q. That's quite tight. It's quite precise. And you see on the wider end, I don't know if this makes sense, but like on the wider end, it only sort of feels like it jumps like sort of 3 spaces, imagine, on like an EQ curve. Like it's obviously doing the same sweep, but it's boosting a lot more and a lot wider. If you put it on that tight Q, so you get resonance, you can feel the resonance of that specific frequency a lot more. But you know, this, for me, I'm literally just going to listen. And like I said, subtractive's always a good place to start. So
Unless you're going for the extreme and kind of hear where you're working, you
yeah,
it's much
like,
more subtle.
do you know what? I don't know why. Somewhere along the line, someone said to me like something along the lines of like, if it's there, like use it. Like when people are like, oh, I'm just gonna, you can't get it in. Like, where's that crappy frequency?
You can always come back a bit. Yeah.
Like there's something boxy there. Then just take out loads,
Yeah.
or just
You
knock
can't
it.
really hear it. You've got to hear it first.
Yeah, but the thing that's nice.
Yeah.
So like, I like that weight there, and then this is a room mic, so it's probably not going to be loads of low end. This was cut on the way in 100%. You know. You listen to it and you're like, cool, it's actually a bit crap. I boosted something bad. I'm always more subtractive. You know, these notches, these amount of dBs that I'm taking out is very low. But then you go, take it out and like, there it is, like that.
I like what you said about even running it through flat, it has a sound of its own.
Oh, 100%. I don't know, maybe it's me being crazy, but
I never even thought of doing that, because it's more circuitry, it's actually more physical electronic.
you can hear it click in, and I just think it sounds sweet now. It might be. It sounds when you just have it in blank, it definitely sounds better on microphones. Like it maybe not on the long fader, but on microphones.
Physical.
It's just going through more nice stuff. These EQs are something daft like £600, £700 each. So like, if I can run it through it.
How do I move them from the desk? I have to slide them.
Yes. That's what Peter Gabriel does, isn't it? He's got tons of equipment, it all runs through it, but nothing's on. Nothing's on. He's got like old effects processors. I like how it sounds going through it. It's like, not doing anything, but makes hits.
Gets deep when you start looking at it really.
Yeah, exactly.
That electronic. Real. Yeah.
So yeah, like the EQs are super powerful. I really encourage to make really good use of them because I think they just make everything magical. Like, especially like the idea of like getting the mix sounding like a mix from the get go. Buses again, you have a path flip. Bussing together and sending short faders, which essentially you can think about them as just microphones to buses, is a really strange thing to do. The only way I can think of a reason you'd want to do that is if you bus a bunch of microphones together to sort of like bus compress like drums on the way in, which is a bit odd, and it wouldn't be the way I would do it either. So you can, again, it's one of those path flips that's a bit pointless. When I explain the busing here in a second, you'll kind of get why you could want to do that. Then you have this root button. This is like the only digital part of the desk, really, like that's kind of controlled. I mean, there are aspects, but this is very much just a digital thing, which is what you would this would have been like a VCA or a patching thing on older analog desks, but they kind of made it easier because it is a bit of a pain to do it physically. So you have these groups in the middle of the desk. These are stereo groups, so you can have the drum group, your synths group, your BVs group. This is a mixing tool. This doesn't go anywhere besides like the mix bus. So this is something that you'd use either when you're recording. So if you had 32 channels and it's getting really overwhelming, you've got all your drums up here, or even the strings, right? You have all your violins, you can have them on one fader, and you have all your violas on one fader, or your cellos on one fader, and your doubles on one fader. So instead of mixing 32 channels, you balance each section and mix 4 channels. Quite a nice like tool to have. Those inputs for these come from the Busmaster matrix, which you basically assign, 1 and 2 go to stereo group 1 and 2. It's like a pair. You think of them as 8 pairs, 16 channels for 8 pairs. So on each channel strip, you have this routing button. So say I had kick, snare, overhead here, these 4 channels, and I balance them and they sound good, like that. But I didn't want to have to keep, if I wanted to move them all up and down, I don't want to do this. It's really annoying, especially if I've got like 8 channels. So then you say, I want my drums to be on channels 1 and 2, which is this fader. Flick those so they're flashing. You press this root button. It's the best LED on the desk because it's ridiculous blue. You select the ones you want. Pick them back up. So now these 4 channels are being routed to these mix buses 1 and 2, and that comes up on this fader.
1 and 2 on there always connected to 1 and 2 there. That's not.
Yeah, the 116 here are 116 here. So think of them as stereo though, because you can think about a mono, but it's not very functional. Like again,
that's the reason they put them as 2 monos in. Is that for like a panning thing?
It's for using a bus. Right, if you had a tape machine, if you had a 16-channel tape machine, that's why.
You then have to take it out of LF to mix.
Yes. Yeah. So you might not do that if you're doing parallel stuff. Yeah. But generally, yeah, you're right. You take the long fader out, which one of the buttons that's kind of always in on this desk is long fader to mix, which basically means you're listening to this fader. It should always be in.
It's convenient.
Yeah. 100%. It's so annoying to not do that.
Yeah, because where I was learning this desk from, you had to do it yourself every single time.
Oh no. That's like sending
as well.
No. So if I then take these out, these long faders are not going to the mix bus. They're just going to this bus, this stereo bus, which means I can turn them up and down all at the same time from here. They'll still record as normal. If you're actually recording these drum mics live, everything recording wise will be normal. This is more like a desk mixing tool. So if you just want to make your life, for example, a producer may sit here without the keyboard, because that's the Pro Tools person's job. They'll sit here and might have a notebook there, and then you give them drums, bass, keys, vocals. They might want control over, I want more vocal, I want more drums, I want more bass, whatever. You as the engineer may be in charge of the balance of the entire drum kit over here. The producer might just want a quick and easy, paint by numbers version of the mix. Just da-da-da-da-da.
Is that signal still analog?
Yeah, everything. The routing, the way it patches it, is a digital switching of analog circuits. So it's still an analog signal flow. You can record these, and there is
a way to do it.
no. The way to do it is pretty easy. You just take the outputs and put them into some inputs. So it's really simple.
You have to patch it.
Yeah, it's just patching some Pro Tools stuff. You obviously lose channels then. If you want to record all of them, that takes 16 channels, so you would lose half the desk inputs wise. So yeah, but that's fine because if you're just printing a mix, say you've done a mix, one of these the function of recording these would be stems versus multi-tracks. So if you've done a board mix, and you've got your stem multi-tracks, that's the right word. Your multi-track is everything individually. It's all your individual mics. Your producer or someone remixing might want a drum stem, a key stem, a bass stem. So you could build those stems on the desk here, do all your mix across the board, build them here, record, and you give your producer whatever 8 stereo stems to remix with. Also protects you from then having your originals multi-tracks because sometimes it's nice not to give people everything, but it's a nice way to create really quick and easy stems for people. Even mastering engineers, some of them ask for stems. They might be like, can you just give me 0 dB, like just pass through, everything's just coming straight through the desk, but they're all just summed already, like your drum stem, your bass stem, your guitar stem, or your vocals. So that could be, it's got a few multi functions.
Are there auxes on those?
On these?
Yeah.
Good question. No, there's not.
So how would you do group bus kind of
like a group bus compression?
Yeah.
Right.
Or
So first off, I would never use these to build headphone mixes because it's just a bit clunky. So I wouldn't build like a group to send down the headphones because you kind of can do that anyway just there. But for example, if you wanted your drum bus, this is your drum bus, right? And you wanted to compress your drum bus, that would be on the patch bay. You would take the out 7 inch. You would literally just take. There is a stage between here and here.
Right.
These are automatically patched to here, but there is that is a patch. It's already made, but it's there. So you can break that patch. So you can say bus master 1 and 2 output to a pair of compressors. Do your compression, return to stereo group. So that would be like, I've routed everything to these knobs, send them to the compressor comes back down here. And then you could then record that like how I said before. Probably not the way I would do bus mix.
How would you do it?
You use a bit of control here, right?
I don't know. How would I do that?
Probably could just do it in the box at that point.
Yeah, if I wanted to use my physical compressors, I would probably just build them on a. I don't know. It's a good question. That would be a very logical way to do it.
What, in the box?
No, on a stereo group and just put an insert in between.
Because otherwise, would you just have to print each one and then patch?
Yeah, basically.
Right, send it to channels
Correct.
through there, and then send it
Correct
back.
me
It's
on
really
that.
long.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So you see, no, we're not going to go on that way. But yes, I would literally come out of the bus outputs here into a compressor into here, and if I really wanted to print that, to be honest, if I was doing a drum bus compression, I probably wouldn't be doing it in the recording stage.
Okay.
The tracking stage. I'd probably be doing it in the mix stage. So the reason I wouldn't do it in the recording stage is because I don't want to use two inputs, to record that compressor back in. Especially because if I recorded the drums, and I am like having the compressor happening here, and those are going into some inputs and coming back into Pro Tools to record them and stuff. Even if I'm tracking like the bass, that compressor's still got to be active unless I then commit to recording that compressed channel, sending it somewhere else.
Right.
So you're basically always having 2 inputs deaded off at that point, which can be a bit annoying because to me, I like to work left to right. So if I got to like channel 15, 16 and I want to do my vocals, but those inputs have already been used for the compressor, I'd be like, oh, fuck, man, I've got to jump there and compressors here. And then I start to not like it and I start to get panicky. So I would be doing that in the mix stage, and only if I was doing like a board mix as well, if I was actually printing from the board. Realistically, if I wanted to do a drum drum mix plus compression, I'd mix my drums either on the board or in the box. And like Io said, send them down 2 channels and use just like an insert, like as an insert on that channel for those compressors, and then just record them.
Maybe we'll do that live and then view that post quite easily.
Yeah, that's like
send them back
you'd basically
Yeah.
mix your drums and then you just like print your mix plus compression from the desk, because then you can just do it really quickly. You can just be like, you can record that back in,
Right.
and then mute all your drum channels, and you've just got like your drum bus mix,
Right.
compressor on it.
Okay.
That's somewhere in the world of like board mixing, and somewhere in the world of like post recording kind of stuff. So it's one of those things you can do in like loads of different ways as well, and whatever feels right is probably the best way to do it. And yeah, it's one of those things also that it's probably going to be easiest to sort of visualize when you've got the compressors. But yeah, doing it on this is not a bad shout. The only thing with this, it's quite hard to monitor back. However, you can do it like this. So for example, right now, those channels are going to here, and then to here. They're also going to the stereo return channel, which you can then send to headphones. That's really over the top, and I wouldn't do that. That just starts getting a bit complicated. But the important thing to know, if we just move on with the channel strip, with that routing thing, there's a button here that says shift/clear route. Hold that down, click in your buses, and it clears them off. So even if you're really goofy and you've done a bunch of stuff and I don't know what's where or whatever, I've done that so wrong. But yeah, if you start getting confused and everything's all there, you can just clear them all off. And if you do bus routing on board, even if you don't reset anything in the EQs and whatever, do reset that part, because that starts getting really headachy if you don't know that's on. Obviously, you have the visual. Obviously, you see the blue, but to be honest, like I've missed it before.
Does it not stay on the blue and everything?
Yeah, it does. But I missed it. I've been like, what's going on? Why am I? Oh, yeah. And I think just quickly as well, if you just put those, so
we're staying.
If I've got those ones to 1 and 2 and these ones 3 and 4, right? Obviously, you're just seeing a bunch of blue. If you press in 1 and 2, it will show you what's on that bus. Like that. So that's nice. That's like friendly and makes your life a little bit easier. Buses are cool. I actually don't use them that much. The short fader, as we talked about before, is where the preamp gets sent. And when we were talking about all these path flips affecting the short fader, it's affecting the recording. So, short fader, got a lot of buttons. I'm going to say how I like to use them. This is many ways. So, there's uses of the short fader that are necessary. For example, you have to either turn it up or press this 0 dB button to get stuff going to Pro Tools. If you don't do that, stuff won't go to Pro Tools. If you can't hear, you've done your preamp, you can see it bouncing, you're like, why is it not going to Pro Tools? It needs to be up. Or it's 0 dB, which essentially just bypasses this fader. Or you can kind of think of it like this. It just locks it at 0. But what it actually does is just gets rid of the fader. That's good if, sometimes I just start by just doing that. Just lets it pass through. Then your only gain stage, really, the preamp. It's like preamp straight to Pro Tools, like bypass. Our friend and colleague Angelo Dissons likes to use the short fader in an interesting way. Again, it's like a different ways to do things. So Angelo doesn't like pushing the preamp very hard. He likes really quiet preamps because he likes barely just for tone. He's like there. He's not looking for signal. He's just looking for tone. So you can do that. Then the short fader is very powerful then, because you've got 0. You also have 10 dB of pushing. So he can then have the preamp lower than maybe is expected and just send more of it to Pro Tools. So you've got your secondary gain stage.
Really good though.
It sounds great. Yeah, no, this is not for clarity. There's no shade on his practice. It's a great way to do it. That's how Angelo learned from his olders, I guess.
And he mixes short faders.
Yeah, you can make so you can use that as a very powerful tool. I am a bit more traditional, I suppose, in a way. I like to get quite a lot of the preamp because I think there's a lot of sound to be unlocked in there. And I try and start at 0. I'm often coming down by like somewhere between 1 and 5 dB. So I'll be sending a little bit less to Pro Tools. I prefer this to be really hot and the digital conversion to just be neutral or slightly lower. So there's like 2 ways there. But essentially, they're your gain stages to Pro Tools. Here is your preamp gain, which is affecting the mic directly. and the Pro Tools send is what you can think of short fader as.
Is there any way to drive through the preamp without a mic? As in, you've already got, let's say, like you bring a mix.
Oh, like reamping something.
Yeah,
just
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 through.
chucking through on line level. Yeah, so you'll see when we get to patch bay, there's like line inputs.
Right.
So you could just send. You're going to be venturing into places where you can feedback there, but essentially what you'll be saying is your Pro Tools output will go into the desk input, which will go into the Pro Tools input. So you just have to be really careful on your monitoring. But yeah, you can do that. I'll be honest, I don't think there's much benefit to doing that.
I was about to ask.
Just for like the tone. So if I've recorded guitar, let's say at home,
Because you particularly like that preamp.
yeah, because you want the sound of the drive.
Yeah.
That saturation.
That's really valid.
For the use of the EQ, maybe.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, to be honest, that's the way I do it. I'd say like I set an output on Pro Tools and then literally patch it into the input. And then what I would just make sure I did then is I'd say I'd have your guitar outputting on 7. I would jump quite a far. I'd be like 7, and the input I'd use is 16.
Right.
Or something like that. Just so you're far away from creating a loop. Anything in line is loop potential.
Right.
So if you said
that if it's physically far away,
somehow it's safer. So say you're outputting your guitar on 16 and you're coming back on input monitor 16 and you're sending back to Pro Tools on 16. That's a lot of 16s.
Right.
And if you hit the wrong input monitoring, suddenly the desk starts screaming and you're
something's going wrong.
So yeah. Yeah, but that's like a totally valid thing to do. You would just never use the mic. You would never leave it on mic mode. You definitely want to be in line.
Right.
But you can still use drive. The drive is definitely there to be used, and it does sound like what you're doing. I think I've done something similar-ish. Probably more like I've just gone straight into the desk because like that's how like some of the Rolling Stones like distortion sound is just a really driven preamp on the desk, like a DI, not even a DI, just straight into the line input and just cranked.
Right.
So that's like a really specific tone. But yeah, you can do that. If you're going to do a lot of it, just download the SSL preamp
Right.
VST
Okay.
because it's quite a lot of effort. But if you're doing a couple of things, like maybe you want to redo a snare and a kick drum, fair play, it does sound nice. But even just going into the channel strip and coming back out of the channel strip on the monitor will sound better because you're running it through something here, and the EQs are going to be really good friends there.
Right.
So on a short fader, up here we had that funny button that was long fader from short fader. I think was it up here? Was I talking about it?
It's on the short fader.
Was I talking about the short fader? Okay, yeah. So we have that one. Pretty much useless. 0 dB is a pass through. Bypasses the fade. What it actually does is it gets rid of this circuit, but you can imagine it just locks it there. So a lot of the time I do just start with them all in, and if I need to adjust, I'll then take it out and use the fader. But I'm pretty much always just at 0. Insert. This is where you would be using outboard. The concept of an insert, I'm guessing that you're aware, but in analog terms, comes out of the fader and back into the same fader. It just is all existing on this fader. So an insert is just a way of sending the signal out and coming back. Imagine it sounds silly, but like point to point. So say this is your signal flow, like in here, out here, and the short fader is so preamp in, Pro Tools out here. An insert just puts you an extra stage in that signal flow. So you can add in a compressor. So that's how you would maybe compress a kick drum on the way into Pro Tools. So you would patch in on your insert one of the compressors, turn it on, do that. You'd be printing your compression, which is a very valid thing to do. Automatically, there's an ins pre. It's always on post. So that's post EQ and post level. That's where you might actually want to not do that. So if you do it on post, so on pre, it will go preamp, EQ, fader into the compressor. On post, it will go preamp, compressor, EQ to Pro Tools. So it's a slightly different order. So it depends if you want to compress before you equalize. It depends if you want to have control of what you're sending to the compressor, or if you just want it to go preamp compressor. Obviously with this, similar to Angelo's style of like driving this a little bit harder, you could send a bit more to the compressor from this end if you have it on post. If you have it on pre, this doesn't matter. It just changes the order operation essentially.
Is it just one insert?
One insert per channel. patchable, so you could have 8 channels with a short fader with a compressor on it, sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah, so you could do that. This is again where you kind of make choices. Maybe you want to compress more of your drums on the way in and print that, so you don't have to do as much later on. But maybe you want to leave your guitars just open, or your pianos just open.
They pick post as the default. Or still
Post. I don't know, it's kind of the argument of do you EQ or do you compress first? Kind of taste.
Yeah.
What if you wanted 2 compressors working at the same time?
On the same channel.
Yeah. You have to do it separately.
You would jump. What? So you want to go preamp to compressor to compressor.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
or
Okay.
anything
I mean,
else, like a
yeah.
reverb or
You would come off. This is patching. This is where you come off the. You go into this
right.
compressor. You come out the back of that compressor. Well, preamp. Into your next bit of outboard
Right,
gear,
okay.
and then your next bit of outboard gear, in out, and then you finally come back into the
Oh,
insert.
I
So
see.
that's how you'll find some studios, for example, channel 16 might be their vocal channel, and always on insert they've got a specific rack that has that always patched in. It will be like a compressor, an EQ, a reverb, another compressor. So that's like
Right.
a vocal chain, and they'll always be like, oh no, vocals have to be on 16 because you've got your vocal
Yeah.
chain there. So, but anything outboard is just jumping. It's just patch rate jumping.
Right.
So you can build up massively long chains. I think the most I've ever had is like 8 outboard pieces in unit on a snare drum or something daft like that, and that was just us being stupid. And we were doing some trickery, and that's also when we we're at uni.
Do the Phil Collins thing.
It's actually the Tony Visconti pitch down snare thing.
Oh yeah.
So when you feed back a pitch, it goes into a pitch unit, pitches it down one step, and you feed it back into itself, and it pitches down another step, and you put the speed really quick, so it goes do. But when you put it quick, it goes pew, and that's how you get that 80s kind of like. Operationally, this is probably one of what I think is one of the most important buttons on this desk. You are going to have much more problems going into Pro Tools because it's this big, complicated digital software. Short fader to mix. This puts the short fader, which is what you're sending to Pro Tools, into the mix bus.
Mm-hmm.
So you can listen to all of your mics and get your balance right and get all your tones right and all your EQs on the short fader right with the computer being off. If that's good, your next step is just sending to Pro Tools and coming back to Pro Tools, which is where you're going to have more like routing problems and bus matrices and IOs and Pro Tools and all that sort of stuff. Because on this side of it, preamp and short fader, those problems are dodgy. Those problems are dodgy cables or dodgy mics or power supplies being broken or things like that. Hardware problems. Oh, that's why. That's the cable. So
Could you repeat that last point?
So, when you go, say we had our 8 mics set up in the main room, and we've gained them, and we've come to the short fader. If we put the short fader up and put it in a mix, what we're listening to on the mix bus here then is the sound of the mics, the preamps, any EQs you want to use, and all your problems on that side are always going to be just like, you know, your mic's not right, your patching's not right, your cables are dud. Or your placement's bad. Everything before you digitize it.
Yeah.
It's the most simple, like plug and play side of it.
Great
So
troubleshooting.
you know then if that all sounds good, what you're sending to the box, the recording medium, sounds good and is got no problems. Because once you're in this realm and you're suddenly going like, oh no, I need to go into this horrible menu on Pro Tools and I need to check the playback engine and my, just earlier I was going like, give me a sec, the Dante's not working. Oh, I need to check this massive I/O patch. We've got 32 channels. Before getting involved in any of that, check your problem isn't just dodgy mics and dodgy cables, because that's a really quick fix. That is not a quick fix. That's how I really encourage you to use it. This short fader.
Why wouldn't you have that on all the time?
Because if you've got your short fader in and then you've got it coming back off Pro Tools as well,
Twice.
you got it twice.
So twice, okay.
And
you
you'll
get that
hear
delay.
it. It'll phase. It sounds really weird. It's like a flanger.
So you have
So-
to turn off the.
Yeah, so I always go short mix in, and then before I start looking at tools, I just make sure they're all knocked out. Short faders mix also has a very funny little extra thing you can do with it, which is if you've got like a musician who, especially like a bassist who hasn't maybe even got a mic in the room, and they need a talk back, just chuck them on one of these channels and put them on a short fader to mix. Don't even put them in Pro Tools. Just have them here. And then they can just have a mic like an SM58 that just can be sent to headphones as well. So that's like plug 2 cables in and get a talkback going kind of thing. Instead of being, oh, hold on, let me set you up a channel in Pro Tools. Let me do your routing. Nah, just chucking short fader up here, turn up into headphones. Then they can hear each other. And then also the fun thing is, if you've got like a drummer who's got a talkback mic here, for example, they often don't need them, but maybe record that mic. It could be your secret mic that sounds really, really cool. Or
We got other placements.
Yeah,
but that's
or
the
like,
one that's good.
you know, you just have this random extra mic and say, oh, that makes everything sound kind of cool actually, or terrible, but you know that's part of the game. But like, if you've got a mic coming in my opinion, record it. Record everything all the time. It's always nice to have stuff. So that's like literally, I always visualize as at the end of this line that says SF, that is, we're going into Pro Tools land. That's where we leave the desk. So that's short mids. You can do the same with like, you can, instead of using short faders mix, you can solo, because then it just sends it to the solo thing. But in my brain, if I'm going to be monitoring the Pro Tools off of the mix, I want to monitor the short fader off of the mix so I can check for discrepancies, because for example, your solo volume might be quieter than your mix volume. So you might go, well, that was quieter when I soloed it than this is on the mix. Yeah, because you're monitoring through two different routes. Monitor through the same route and you'll feel better. Cut. Yeah, it's there. I guess you could have it on. I suppose you should always have them in, but we don't. Cut's one of those ones that like, cut is the same as that. Although I do like to encourage to leave the desk completely cut.
Don't think we've ever done that.
It's good practice, but I never do it. Kind of a nice visual cue to see what channels you actually got in and on, but I wouldn't bother doing it with short faders. It's also just like the fiddliest button because it's tucked in. So yeah, don't worry about cut, but you know what it does in terms of. So that's short fader. That's basically us going to Pro Tools, and then on the bottom section here, this is the long fader section, the elusive thing we talked about all day. You have an insert, exact same concept as here, but your insert will not be recorded on the fader. That's a mix tool if you're mixing on the board. And same, you get a pre if you want to preamp. Oh, skip over. There's a pan knob for the short fader. Doesn't affect the recording, but again, this is where you can fully build. Like say you had overheads here, kick snare. You know, working backwards. Then you can literally start building and leveling your whole mix and be like, okay, this maybe we can jump to like what a mix would sound like.
That doesn't go to Pro Tools.
The pan doesn't, no. But what you can do is almost do like a mix on the short fader and just for like monitoring, and then quickly switch back over to like sending it at the correct level. And the pan doesn't do anything, that's just a monitoring thing. So yeah, I really like using the short fader almost like a sort of check before I print. Sometimes the nice thing Pro Tools is just a tool to record the channels at this stage. You've got so much here to use. And yeah, long fader is that same thing. Yeah, there you go. And then we have, again, a 0 dB button, the exact same as a short fader, a cut and a solo. The solo obviously is a lot more functional on the long faders. You know, like, oh, can I just hear my violins quickly? There you go. There's your violins. Whatever. The cut does affect, so you can't be cutting solos. That won't make any sound. Cut is like the overarching cut for the whole channel. And your saving button, absolute save of all time on this desk. I've got a bunch of solos in. I'm looking at a bunch of lights over there and I can't see what's in or what's out. Solo clear, the best button on the desk, clears all your solos.
I did not know that existed.
If you go like, oh yeah, crazy. Oh, cool. Right. Oh, why can't I? So I've just lent over
really
here. It's really annoying. And they refuse to build that function into Pro Tools. There is not a shortcut, nor a key command, nor a button
There is a
that will
logic.
clear solo. I know.
There is a
I
logic.
know. Pro Tools, for some reason, have actually put a statement out there saying they
There isn't
don't want to add it. From that level, that's like the real functionality of the desk in the most like day-to-day terms. We didn't really go over it, but there's obviously the center section of the desk. We looked at this little matrix here. Really, here you've got two things you need to look at. Talk all talks to just talk back. It's talk back. See, the headphone amps are flashing. It's talking back. There is like a bit of fancy stuff you can do with this. So what talk all means is it sends to all three places: studio, fold back, and fold back. So I can't remember what they call studio, but I think it means like it might mean like a tape room or something like that, but like a second location. Not many people use that. So it will send audio there. Obviously, that goes nowhere here, and it sends it to fold back A and B, which is the headphone amps we talked about. So this will all go there. You can just above it select just fold back A or fold back B. So say you had the drummer on B and the rest of the band on A, and you needed to tell the drummer something privately, you could just talk to B.
Oh, so you can crack jokes.
Yeah, so you can be like, man, did you hear that bassist? He sucks. Oops, I was talking to everyone. Or, hey man, did you hear that drummer? He sucks. You can send to each amp individually, which actually, the only time I've used that functionally is conductor versus orchestra. Sometimes you need to be like conductor, or like I think one time there was an MU representative in there, and I used to ask the MU person when's break. Like, luckily they were on their own headphone feed, so I was like, "Hey, when's the MU break?" And they're like, "In 15 minutes." I was like, "Cool."
Wow.
I didn't have to bother all the musicians who were all having a chat, you know. So that's quite useful. The other one is talkback level. So I leave it dimed because the talkback in here is not the loudest, and it allows you to be here. You can still see I'm getting signal. The worst. Yeah, can you hit, bro? Of course I can definitely hear. So leave it really high. Put the mic back here. Everyone in the room can be heard. Just don't, you know. Sometimes you get someone go like, no, they can hear you, and they often as well. If you leave it all the way up, if someone's on the sofa, they don't feel the need to get up and come over to the desk and be like, "Can you hear me?" Because they'll be like, "Can you hear me?" And they can, "Oh yeah, I can hear you." So cool. The talkback dims the desk so that you can hear. So you can. So if you're playing music back, it doesn't go into their ears too loud, sort of vibe. You can undo that. You can go on talkback and undo the dim. So, for example, if you would still want to talk to them whilst you're listening to something back, you're not having to then crank. So that's kind of the whole talkback. There isn't much else needed here. Like we talked about listening to the stereo cues on their own. This little section here that says meters, all that does is affect how the metering works on the desk. I have it set to a way that I think works nice for everyone, which is like the meters that it's to do with brightness, and they retain a little hold for like all settings. You see, they hold that level. It's basically just at default because I think it works nice. So you shouldn't need to touch them. Up here, just that solo clear button. That's really the only thing you'll probably need to do. There are a couple options here, but it kind of is in some really weird monitoring terms that we don't really do. The button that says red light turns that red light on. That's literally all that button does at the moment. It would send a signal to a red means recording lamp, but right now that button literally just does that. It's so then above that you have the sleep stuff and the clear button that we talked about earlier. There is an oscillator. It sounds horrible, like a signal generator. It's a signal generator. You know, earlier I said, oh, you might have a tape machine that's got 16 channels. It's your test. It's how you test that you're sending signal to your tape machine. But it's also how 400 hertz happens to be a signal that is a number that you bias tape machines to. You bias tape machines sometimes to like 400 or 1,000, 10,000, and 15,000 hertz. It's heritage. That is heritage. That is literally just them going, someone who buys a desk like this, which is analog, might want to use a tape machine with it. So we better put a signal generator on it. Mix bus fader. So actually got some cool functions. Pretty much you always want it up because it goes to 0. It has no plus, so you can just have it right at the top. I tend to just leave this should stay up. That's just, you know, your volume of your mix bus level, not your monitoring level. That dictates how much level goes into mix bus compressor, which we'll move on to in a second. But you can also do an insert on the mix bus. So if you know you're talking about doing other channels and stuff, if you have different compressors like for mix bus, or even if you would just soloed all your drums and put the insert on the mix bus, or like not solo, but you cut everything but your drums, you can essentially then treat the mix bus of the whole desk as your drum mix bus.
Right. Okay.
Put an insert, send to a compressor, record that. So you could just print through certain aspects if you want to do a couple like sort of bus compression things. Again, we have no inserts, but it's there for when it needs. It's a patch-based thing, you know, plug in. What you do have, though, is we have the glorious mix bus compressor. This unit on its own is something like $2,000. This is a beautiful mix bus compressor. It's a compressor. It works like a normal compressor would. It's got an auto release. It has notched attacks and releases. Threshold down to -20. Boost up to +20.
How does the sidechain knob work? That's a good question.
I'm not 100% sure. What I think it does is from like experimenting, because it's not an insert. It's not like a side chain from a kick drum. Sometimes you want to compress what is it like? Your ears naturally hear more low end, and low end also when you compress low end on a mix bus, that's where you can lose a lot of headroom because it takes up like a lot of sonic energy. So the sidechain is you treat it as a high pass filter.
Oh.
So you can high pass filter the mix bus. So only everything above 300 hertz goes to the compressor. Everything else gets let through. So that can just give you a bit of control on the whole thing. You know, because if you start really compressing like a kick and a bass, so you got a mix and you got a kick and a bass drum in there. Sorry, a kick and a bass guitar in there, and you're heavily compressing the mix. You're also heavily compressing those two together. You might start getting sidechain. You might want that low end to breathe a bit better than the rest of the mix. So that's all it is, as far as I know. It's just a high pass filter. I don't think it's an insert because there's no patch bay for it. I asked them. There's no ins. Also, it'd be really cursed to sidechain your mix bus against something. That'd be really weird. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a really nice compressor. Like practically.
Oh, so there's no patching, just so
It's just always on the mix bus. So. So, you know, it's a compressor. It's pretty aggressive. One of those things as well where in and on and not doing anything, I think sounds nice. I actually now mostly start sessions with it kind of, I've almost got like a set position. Can't quite remember what it is now, but it's basically just a really slow and soft compression that I have on all the time, just so I'm always going to be doing a mix at the end of the day with a compressor on the mix bus in like the door. So I just like to have this on as kind of like a reference, so I know that it's a bit of a sort of vanity thing as well. It's like if I have it on and sounding loud, everything sounds cool. So like, you know, a bit of compression never hurts. But you can print directly from this. So if you do a board mix, you can take the outputs from the mix bus compressor, put them into Pro Tools and record your mix through it, which is a print, which you can also set up at the start of the session to always be happening. So no matter when you're tracking, you're always recording the mix, which means at the end of the session, you don't have to go, oh, hold on, let me just really quickly mix this down for you. You can just instantly have a board mix for them, which is really useful.
It doesn't take so long at the end of the session
Yeah.
when they want to mix.
When you record the
on the
compressor,
whole,
you have to record live. You have to print it online.
Yeah.
Online mixing? Online
Real-time.
printing? Real-time printing, yeah. Yeah, so you literally have your obviously your monitor level, volume. You dim it. Quite useful if you chat to someone and go, oh, sorry, but no, can't hear you. Mutes left and right speakers. That's more of like a technical thing if you think one of your speakers is dead, so you probably won't do it. You can phase flop your left speaker, which makes you feel sick. Not nice. Mono, incredibly useful button. Check your stereo stuff. If it doesn't work in mono, it will sound crap. Because your overheads might sound great when they're panned left and right, put them together and they sound like nothing because your phase is out. This is your other phase tool. So you can like select your two mics that might be out of phase, put it in mono. And if it sounds like very quiet, you know you might be out of phase. Because sometimes you can hear phase as like a washy thing. Sometimes you hear phase as just shit disappears. So yeah, I mono button's really good. And it's a real, this is nerdy, but this is a true mono sum. This is an actual analog mono sum, so it's a bit more reliable than just putting everything in the center. So that if you put all these, it's still going to a stereo bus. This is a true mono sum. That's really cool. You have your alternative monitor levels and your dim level. So dim level is how much it makes it quieter. So you can have it quite aggressive. So, but I would leave in the middle. I think it's just like it's almost like a intention thing. It's like it does feel a bit quieter, but I'm like trying to cut it. Alt monitor 1 and 2. Alt monitor 1 is these other speakers which are going, and it's just a volume control. They are level matched now. You don't need to touch them. Then we have your source select and your monitor select. Monitor source and monitor select. So monitor source mix is your faders. It's the stuff that's coming out of the individual fader to the mix bus. That's your bread and butter. That's mostly what you'd be listening to. You have external 1, which is the Mac on. If you put the Mac on headphones, like that, on headphone output, you'll notice it's quite noisy because it's not the best preamp. So don't reference mix off of this. External 2 is the aux. The aux is the black cable there that goes into that red unit I was talking about before.
I can't sell anything.
That one is a bit. That one is more reliable. So if you do want to plug a laptop in, that's not as loud. You can kind of hear that's not making much noise at all. External 3 is nothing, and we're back to mix. You can have two sources at the same time, and then you have your monitor select. So mains is the Dynaaudios. You can only have one at once, so you can only have our lovely Dynaaudio speakers or our questionable Quested audio speakers, which are just too wide. They're fantastic speakers, they're just too wide. So yeah, that's yours. The only one you can add in is headphones. And it's not those headphones, it's the hilarious headphone ports underneath the desk here. Giant desk, 2 tiny headphone ports, just to see that.
Wow.
I would not recommend monitoring headphones off the desk directly from there. Go from there or from the Focusrite. These are very, very not good.
They sound really weird when I'm trying.
Very weak is what they are.
Yeah.
As you see, we're playing back in Pro Tools. If you look closely, look really closely. Chan in, mon in.
Does that actually say that?
Yeah, Chan in, mon in. Yeah. So your right hand side meter is your monitor return for Pro Tools. Your left hand side meter is your input. So I like to keep everything in line. So if my kick is coming in on channel 1, I want to monitor my kick from Pro Tools on channel 1 because then it looks cool. You can cross patch. You can have randoms. You can have your inputs completely mismatched to your monitors. I think that's horrible and scary. So you can do it if you want, but you probably will get caught up because then switching between short fader and long fader is switching between your microphone or some random other channel. If you do it this way, if your vocals here, input here and output here, you can go like, oh, I'm on the long fader and I've got this really nice EQ. I actually think I want to record that. Okay, I'll record it. Actually, I don't want to record it. Way simpler. But if you're like, right, that was on the long fader because that's where my vocal's coming back, but my input's actually over here. So now I've got like quickly, no, horrible. And oh, by the way, the headphone amp has an individual level that is different to the monitor level. So you can have the headphones up and the room's down. So that if, for example, you've got open back headphones, you don't get a weird kind of like I can hear it in the room and in my headphones kind of vibe.